very superstitious. Writings on the wall, very superstitious. Letters about to fall.
Oh, you're an astrophysicist?
Amongst other things. I also work for SETI.
You're a believer.
I think that it's narrow-minded to discount the possibility of life outside of this solar system, yes. Sir.
So you've decided.
It's hard to ignore the laws of probability.
Except, with no evidence, all you're left with is your faith in the idea.
Men are probably nearer the central truth in their superstitions than in their science.
Thoreau. But when superstitions become convictions, that only leads to fanaticism.
Good morning, London. It is Thursday, August 16. I'm Bob Metz, and this is Just Right on CHRW 94.9 FM, where we will be with you from now until noon. No, not right wing, just right.
Fade into color, and color into black and white. Under the bedclothes, everything will be alright.
Welcome to the show today. Very hot and humid Thursday for us. You can call if you'd like to call in on the show today, 519-661-3600 if you want to join in on the conversation, or email us at justrightchrw@gmail.com if you are listening to us online or hearing us on another medium. By all means, we like to hear from you and hear what you have to say. Today, a little bit something different. I have a guest, close friend of mine, and a political compatriot, no doubt, and that is Paul McKeever, who happens to be the leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario, the same party you hear me talking about. Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Morning, Bob. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Paul, I know you're not a stranger to London. London, on your way here, you said you felt very much at home.
Oh, yes, indeed. I in fact lived right in the area, having attended UWO from about 1989 to 95.
That's true. You know, I'm looking at your outline here, and I'm going, you have not just one university degree, not two, but three. Is that right?
Almost four, actually. I did, after spending some time in Peterborough doing my undergrad, I came here and did a master's in psychology and did a year of PhD before switching to law. So, yeah.
Well, it's I guess, so you had your honors, Bachelor of Science at Trent University, I understand. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
And then here at the University of Western Ontario, that's where you got your master's degree in psychology and your law degree.
Correct,
at Western Law School. Well, I think with those things in mind, perhaps I can, pick at your mind for some of that expertise in those areas for the subject matter we're going to go out on today, if we're going out on a limb here. We could have talked about a number of issues. You might think we're going to talk about the usual political stuff you've heard all the time, but we're actually going in a slightly different direction. I gave Paul sort of an option almost of what he wanted to talk about today. And no, he didn't want to talk about specific issues here and there, or even the provincial election, which is just coming up and around the corner. But what seems to be on top of his mind these days seems to be, how should political and public issues be decided or resolved? And as I put the question last week, it was a matter of, I guess, faith, consensus, or reason, or a combination, or is it pragmatism? Is it something else? And why would these things be so foremost in your mind?
Well,
because I know you deal with these issues all the time.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, obviously, since 9/11, there's been a lot of focus on the role of religion and its relation to government, both because of, the various communities in Canada and the United States who are concerned that because some terrorists share their religion, that they might be targeted here at home. Having had the same religion, they might be treated as though they're terrorists. At the same time, we have, especially in the United States, a president who's openly identified very strongly with a faith, in particular Christianity. And some would say that some of his policies and laws that he'd like to introduce are, inspired by that faith rather than inspired by things like, the needs of science and et cetera.
Now, is this a problem? Does this create a problem? Like, why would it even be a consideration? Aren't we a tolerant society? Don't we believe in all faiths and all beliefs and all sorts of things like that? Isn't that really what Western society is all about?
Yeah, I think it's true that the hallmark of the West is its ability to allow people to live side by side in peace, believing whatever they want to believe. But the way we've achieved that has not been by taking religious belief and basing laws upon it. Rather, what we've done is very carefully in the West tried to make sure that religious beliefs based on faith but not on observable fact don't enter into the process of lawmaking. So in other words, lawmaking is a very earthly affair. Religion is a very, if you want to call it, heavenly affair. I don't personally believe in a heaven, but if you want to think of it as an otherworldly affair. And I think that really relates back to, the comment even by Jesus at one point was, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, render unto God that which is God's. And I think it was Lord Acton who said, well, by saying that, Jesus had effectively drawn the line between state and church, and that's what allowed the West really to thrive when other countries in the world were suffering under religious rule.
Well, I'm reminded back when I was doing Left, Right, and Center with Jim Chapman way back when, he once asked me on the air, he said, how do I feel about the word God being in the preamble to the Constitution, right? And I never brought up anything about my personal beliefs because my idea of God is not a literal one, but I don't object to the concept in a more of an abstract, symbolic way. And my answer to Jim at the time, and tell me what you think of this, I said that I don't object to the word being there because to me implied in that is that our, quote, God-given rights, end quote, are not derived from the permission or substance of other people. I thought that was sort of symbolically what that meant. And of course, I'm also a little naive in my beliefs in religion. I was indoctrinated in the Catholic Church. I grew up with not a literal belief in a lot of things. I'm only beginning to realize, I guess since 9/11, that some people take it quite literally. Is my viewpoint on that wrong? Am I taking the wrong point of view? Should I stop thinking about it that way, do you think? Or is there a danger in that? Well, or is it okay as long as we, put, quote, religion in its place where it belongs and put reason in its place? Are the two even in any way? And religion, by the way, is a much broader concept. We're not just talking about religion. Sure. I know we're going to get into other issues from global warming on down, but yeah. How would you approach that with the God?
Well, taking that idea that there's a sphere that's for the state and a sphere that's for religion, it's clearly the case that you should be able to believe whatever you want to believe. I mean, if you want to believe that leprechauns control Earth from the planet Pluto, you should be free to do so, to say that's what you believe, to advocate it, to try and encourage other people to believe the same thing. But the line is, where that kind of belief inspires lawmaking. So if you believed, did I say leprechauns? If you said it was a leprechaun on Saturn controlling things on Earth, you certainly wouldn't want the government to be making laws in accordance with what was allegedly the commandments of a leprechaun sitting on Saturn, because there are lots of people. I mean, when you start to make laws based on the needs of the leprechaunians, if you want to call it that, at the same time, you're most likely going to lead into violations of everyone else's religious beliefs. You cannot help but trot upon other people's religious beliefs as soon as you start making religious belief a part of government lawmaking. So your question, though, was about the use of God in relation to the Constitution.
Right.
And there, I think, that was actually added later on. I remember there was a comment, and I don't recall who he was responding to, but the Prime Minister at the time, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, didn't see any need to say anything about God in the Constitution, figuring, I think, that God really didn't care if he was mentioned or not. I mean, he was a Catholic, I think, but he didn't see any point in mixing religion with law, and it was because of the insistence of some in the Parliament that had to be introduced to the Canada Act in particular. I think it was the Charter. But
so would you say that in many ways many of our laws today have been made, quote, by the leprechauns, if you want to put it that way?
Well, there's certainly a tendency, especially since the the religious right organized itself as such. In other words, as soon as religious people realized that they could vote as a bloc, that they could influence one party's policies greatly, I think that example from the U.S. has been mimicked elsewhere, in particular in Canada. And so we're seeing right now, for example, a Conservative Party of Canada that is more religious than any that it's ever preceded it, at least more openly religious. I understand that they've been trying to silence those within the party who are most vocal about religion. The Scott Reeds, and there was another person from Eastern Ontario. But I think the fact of the matter is that faith guides the decision making of a lot of people who, especially on the conservative.
If that's true, then why silence it? If the public has such a religious bent, is it not an asset to a party to be seen as having some religious background?
I think certainly as an electoral thing, it's useful to that party to openly advocate itself as being religious. I think that's what the Conservative Party largely is, and I think it is would be disingenuous to suggest it isn't, that it's somehow a secular party. It's not. It's doing its best to remain secular in terms of how it governs Canada, but I think the fact of the matter is that the party itself is made up of people of varying faiths. Not all of them. I think some of them are not. But
we could say that about Freedom Party too, couldn't we? There
absolutely.
are people in this party that are of varying faiths. We've had candidates of varying faiths. So how are those things reconciled? What's the common ground?
I think the common ground is, as I say, a recognition that whatever your beliefs are, that's fine, but that government decision-making should not be based on obedience to an alleged commandment by somebody's God, because at that point, freedoms get trod upon, and even freedom of religion gets trod upon.
I'm going to get back to some more specific terms. We're going to come actually to like hardcore definitions shortly, but I don't want to get to that quite yet. When I really started getting into studying religion as a consequence of 9/11, because you gotta, if stuff like that starts happening, you better start understanding what the driving forces are behind it. And it was really then that I started looking at it in the sense of how literally some people take a lot of their beliefs. But as I studied it through history, a historical view of religion rather than a faith-based view or a religious view from one religious denomination's point of view. And tell me if you think this is way off target or way off the center base, but I've kind of been led to one broad conclusion about religion, and that is that religion and politics are almost one and the same thing historically, and come from the same seed, if you will. I was raised, for example, indoctrinated in the Roman Catholic faith, and of course, Roman Catholic, if you look at even the definition of the word, what does it mean? It has nothing to do with Christianity per se. It's about, Catholic means universal, and we're talking about Roman, so we're really talking about, Roman Catholic equals universal Roman law, like the basics of Roman law as it was laid down back at the time of Constantine in the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when the actual Emperor of Rome, that was where they decided and created the Holy Roman Empire, where Christ was declared divine, and that there would only be one God rather than many. And it seems to me that in light of this, and it's an exquisitely and meticulously, how shall we put it, documented event, like many people. Right. The historians will tell you this thing is like they had CNN cameras there. That's how detailed it was.
Sure. And
yet, despite that historical accuracy of that event and the fact that I don't see anybody denying it, you still, there it is. It's invented, and yet people take it literally today. Now, am I looking at that wrong? Am I missing some key point about?
Well, I think you're correct in saying that certainly until I would say the 1600s. Religion and state was largely a situation of synonymous terms. But with the French Enlightenment, which the central figures in the French Enlightenment were actually atheistic. They didn't believe in a supernatural, intelligent being that controls the world. They believed in a more materialistic scenario. In other words, there wasn't a dualist view of the universe. There wasn't two realities, one sort of an afterlife and one an earthly one. They said, no, it's just an earthly one. And that, they published volumes and volumes. They published the most influential encyclopedia in human history. And I think as a result of that, though, with the likes of Rousseau, there was some pushback from people who said, well, wait a minute, okay, we'll make some room for scientific belief, we'll make some room for scientific discovery. Sure, maybe the church was wrong to interfere with, assertions about how the planets orbit the sun and etc., but that doesn't mean we have to get rid of God altogether. And so Rousseau, who was a very religious man, and those who followed him, who formalized his political beliefs in terms of a more thorough philosophy, like Kant in particular, have, I think, given some pushback to the whole thing. So now we've got not a society that's, as secular as, say, the French Enlightenment theorists would like it to be, but rather one that I would say increasingly, especially in the last 6 years, has been guided by faith. And I think there is reason to have concern about that, not simply because, I would prefer government to keep its break with religion, but that also is going to lead to religious persecution of religious people.
We certainly see a lot of evidence of that in the world today. Listen, we're going to take a quick little break here right now, and when we come back, I think we'll expand the conversation a little bit into other areas besides strictly religion and see how the ideas of, let's say, non-rational, non-objective evidence are applied to politics. We'll be back right after this break.
I say corn.
And I say soybeans.
But I get waited on.
Corn. Soybeans.
Corn. But I get waited on.
Joe, will you stop interrupting? Now, this is important. Fellas, you better make up your minds, otherwise I can't guarantee to deliver your seed on time. Sam, you can put me down for soybeans.
75 bushels of corn.
Fred, you're making a mistake.
Ben, when Doris of Lumbago starts acting up, it's a sure sign to plant corn.
Yeah? Well, when Emily gets her cranky spells, you better be out there planting soybeans.
Well, Doris of Lumbago's been right more times than Emily's cranky spell.
Oh, I don't agree with you.
Well, now, you remember what happened back in 48.
That you don't